How's everyone doing? Good? Have you been drinking water? OK, make sure to get dehydrated. So I want to tell you about my social media feeds, because it's really relevant to the next topic. Is a couple weeks ago, during the Super Bowl time, my feed is mysteriously full of Taylor Swift dating the football player. It's everywhere. If I go to TikTok, if I go to Twitter, if I go to even my Chinese social media platform, it's full of the content, homogeneous content. And lately, during ETHDenver time, I was trying to go back to crypto Twitter to find out some interesting events and people to get to know to or events to attend. My Twitter is full of Dune content because I really want to watch Dune 2. My favorite character is Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya. So this is actually introduced to the next topic, which is about algorithm and ranking in our social feed. I was reading this New Yorker article called "Why Internet is Boring Now," which says we're leaving the pull internet where we have agents and actively pulling content, pulling topics, and pulling people into our digital world. We're now in the push era, where we've been pushed to see many stuff we might not intend to see, but they can maximize our dopamine stimulation in our neural system. So the next topic is actually relate to this, and actually I really like the topic. The name is called Building MySpace and For You Pages on Decentralized. Sorry, I'm gonna do it again. Building MySpace and For You pages with Decentralized ID, where it's going to be moderated by my fantastic colleague Homin, who is the co-founder of Next.ID, which is the aggregator of a variety of decentralized identities on page, and where you can go to web3.bio to check it out. And we also have Leo from Maitri, Sahil from Karma3 Labs, Zhen Yong from Web3.auth, as well as Itai from Turbahn, from Dynamic.xyz. Sorry about mispronunciation. OK, let's give them a round of applause. So guys, please take over the stage.
Yeah, just like a guitarist.
I was going to say the mic is right in our face.
Yeah, it's a podcast type.
Yeah. How do you guys feel? Like, exciting?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's do it. So this is an identity panel. So we have some of our speakers. So I'm Homin. I'm the co-founder of Next.ID, which is doing the identity management protocol for for AI agents, for the wallet, also for the Web2 handle. So basically, we're doing a new approach and doing a new narrative. And here's Zhen from Web3.auth, Itai from Dynamic, and Leo from Maitri.Network, and Sahil from Karma3. Yeah. Maybe we can just give a quick intro from
Zhen. Yeah, for sure. Maybe I'll go first. I'm Zhen. I'm one of the co-founders of Web3.auth. I hope everybody's having a good time in Denver. It's a bit cold for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
We're the leading wallet as a service provider. Today, powering some brands you guys know and love, including Animoca, Safe, McDonald's, Universal Studios, so on and so forth. And we're just excited to be here, you know?
Yeah.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me OK? Yeah? Oh, sweet. OK, perfect. I'm Itai from Dynamic. We essentially do Web3 authentication. So if you go into Starknet in the last drop, or if you go into IYK or Sound.xyz or any of those sites and you click login, that entire experience is powered by Dynamic or Doodles or Pudgy Penguins. So you click login, and whether you have a wallet or you don't have a wallet, we kind of handle that. We handle user management. We handle authorization. Pretty much anything you need behind that login button.
My name is Leo. I'm from Maitri.Network. What we're primarily doing at Maitri is incentivizing interoperability in social media. So it's a type of architecture that breaks the winner-take-all dynamic that we have in social media so that we can incentivize applications to actually want to interoperate with one another and want to work on it. As you can imagine, the identity layer is very near and dear to us as it relates to social media. And one of the things that we're specifically working on at the moment is implementing decentralized community graphs, which are kind of like social graphs, but different in the sense that they enable us to represent communities and membership in communities in a way that that's loose rather than binary. You might be partially a member or fully a member or anywhere along the spectrum. And the governance around that, which is allowing community members to vote on other members' level of membership. And that's where identity and reputation systems become extremely important, as well as Sybil resistance. So this is all very at the core of what we're doing.
Hey everyone, my name is Sahil, and I'm from Karma 3 Labs, and we're building a decentralized reputation protocol. So I love the topic and the theme, MySpace and For You. I think one of the earliest use cases that we're seeing is that really blockchains or social graph protocols like Farcaster or Lens have an open data, open social graph layer. And when you have that, then you have the ability to really create custom algorithm layers where developers and users can actually create their own personalized feeds, ranking systems. They don't have to deal with spam. So we're building the compute layer, which can power these ranking and recommendation systems for Web3 social, for on-chain communities who need to distinguish between who's a reputable person in the community versus a Sybil or a spammer. So yeah, we're in the early days and building out a protocol which we'll share more about.
So since Web3 is naturally something with a crypto, but I think 5 of us project, we never launched a token yet. So I'm just really curious, Zhen and Dynamic, Itai, maybe you guys are partnership together before doing the MPC wallet implementation. And I'm just really curious, how's the implementation going on, and also how do you guys feel selling the onboarding SDK to the enterprises? Because I think, to me, when I'm talking to more Web2 companies, it's going to be pretty hard to just convince them to do something more with Web3 and also to just do the implementation. Yeah.
So I think I really resonate with what you've been saying, this cycle especially. Yeah. You know, in the 2022 cycle, for us, a lot of the growth that we saw and we felt was driven from Web2 companies primarily moving to Web3, all of that interest, large brands really wanting, and the innovation labs wanting to try things out. We have been, with this cycle, we have been seeing that growth as well, but the growth definitely is not coming from the enterprise segment anymore. The enterprise segment is actually still very cautious in particular, and I think it's a combination of the high interest rates, the tech layoffs, and then AI basically being the poster child that every innovation lab really needs to take. You can't really, as a member of an enterprise, get budget for a 20-man team, do something on crypto at this point.
Yeah, I think to your point, that what we've seen isn't necessarily growth in enterprise versus growth in a bunch of startups that are trying to abstract away crypto and to build an experience that is kind of Web2 in the front and kind of crypto behind the scenes. So what we're seeing is a lot of kind of growth in, Venmo-like applications that are trying to do cross-country stablecoin type transfers where there are wallets on both sides or there's auth on both sides, but an end user doesn't necessarily need to know it's crypto, right? So we're seeing this interesting crypto-enabled stack that abstracts away crypto completely on the front end, but has all of these kind of capabilities on the back end. We're seeing a lot of that. So a lot of these startups, they're being built, whether it's, again, physical digital experiences like IYK, where you scan, for those that don't know, it's a really cool company, kind of scan a physical kind of NFC chip, get a digital experience. So that is the microphone okay, by the way?
Put it a little bit closer.
Oh, really? Choppy. Is this better? Yeah? Okay. So we're seeing a lot of folks try to build those experiences, not necessarily just enterprises trying to do if they do, to your point, it's more of a kind of side project, innovation teams versus a core integration. So that's kind of the difference from the last cycle.
Yeah, so I also talked to Sahil before because we are also doing a identity layer, like the identity data, also the social graph data. So we were talking about the partnership, but I think Sahil, the Karma 3, they are doing something really awesome. Like they can just use our data to doing some algorithm. I think it's kind of like a different approach. Like some of our we are doing the to Web2 or we can just directly to do something to Web3 or the on-chain data. So how do you feel like the future of the data does all the identity will be just on-chain, or it's going to be the kind of dynamic? It's going to be so per my perspective, it's going to be 3 kind of different things. Maybe AI agents, they can be the identity. Also your wallets, which is going to be the financial identity, and we can just have the Web2 identity. We can use the OAuth and have the user on board. So I'm really curious, what are you guys doing recently? And yeah.
No, absolutely. So I think the most important thing, which has been our thesis and mental model while we're building Karma 3 Labs, is how can we address problems in the Web3 context? And the Web3 context is you have open social graphs like Farcaster and Lens today. There'll be many thousands of these graphs that can be created over time. You have blockchain data, which is open. You have users who have the sovereignty to control their actions. They own the private keys, right? So within this context, if people have to have consumer experiences, we need things like what Itai and what we're seeing with Web3 Auth, having safe onboarding of users. But then the next layer is, how do we make relevant experiences for users based on their data, which is openly accessible? Web 2 got this really right. Google used PageRank for indexing the web and solving search. Social media companies built up recommendation engines. You can see Facebook, TikTok, really mining and controlling the data. So in order to create relevant experiences for users in Web3, our mental model is we need to solve these problems, but with an open stack. So we think a lot about an open algorithm, an open ranking layer for powering social and consumer experiences. So in the last 1 year, a lot of our focus is where are those ecosystems like Farcaster, Lens, MetaMask, Optimism, which are open communities, and they need a ranking or recommendation layer. Let's work with them. Let's build open tools, open source, public infrastructure which can help developers actually create a safe environment for users. So that's how we think about solving problems in Web3 which could not be solved in Web2, and they need this computing infra. Even with AI agents, how do you trust one agent over the other, right? And there's a lot of security attack vectors that you have to think about when solving it. So I think a lot of our head is, in a very geeky way, go and solve for a compute system which provides verifiable computation on on-chain data so that third-party developers can build amazing experiences. So that's how I see in the next 18 months, a lot of innovation in social and consumer, especially with some of the tooling which is now being built out. But this ranking recommendation is a key piece. For Web2, it was important to get 1 billion users to interact with some of these consumer apps. Web3, we're far away from that, but we know we need to build these tools before we even get there. So that's how we're thinking about what kind of problems to tackle at Karma 3. And this year, we're moving a little bit from whatever we learned on working with these use case partners, how do we solidify that into a generalizable protocol so that any third party can use these APIs, can create their own algorithms without having to ask permissions from a centralized gatekeeper.
So Sahil, I really love what you guys are working on, and we're very much on the same team here of trying to solve the same problems. I love the PageRank approach. I think you're, in this context, you're calling it eigenrank. Is that right?
Yeah, eigentrust. Yeah.
Eigentrust. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a really cool way of adapting that. I'm curious how because we've been thinking about the same problem of how do you make sure that people end up with unique accounts rather than creating multiple ones.
So that's actually a very good question, and I think this is the right kind of audience to think about it. I think a lot of times we think about, hey, you'll have embedded wallets. How do you tie? Basic composability breaks in some way, right? When you have to create a social graph of one user that may have app-specific wallets. And I think we're not trying to solve that problem. I do think we have to think hard about how this world would exist and grow. But I think we need some thinking together. What tools will come up? to where people might self-identify, hey, this is my DID, but these are my 10 different EOAs attached to a DID, and it makes sense for me to connect these EOAs to one DID so that I can get better experiences. But it's opt-in, right? Google or Apple or Facebook doesn't control that data about me. So I think I don't have an answer, but that's how I at least think about it today.
I agree with that. I think that's definitely part of the solution, which is how do we incentivize people to not create duplicate accounts, because linking it all to one account gives you a better experience and gives you a higher level of reputation and trust, to the point that you're kind of harming yourself by doing duplicates, at least in most cases. In some cases, you'll still, we'll still have the problem of people creating duplicates.
And one small example is today I can create 10 accounts on Twitter, but I might only accrue a reputation on one account. And it's not like if I want people to read what I say, I will go to the account which has the biggest blast radius or impact radius versus to a non-account which not many people follow, right? So these are like Web 2 problems also we have to think hard about. I think Itai has a point.
I think it's a very good and active discussion topic that we have pretty much daily around exactly what you said, which is how do you move, for instance, siloed embedded wallets into global embedded wallets? Now, I think the first thing is to think about whether you really have to. Right? There are some use cases in which you really don't, right? So, for instance, if we think about the decentralized Venmo use case, then really I don't care that I have multiple identities. I just care that I have an account and I can transfer money to you. It doesn't have to be connected to
the Sybil resistance comes from the amount of money you have in the account, and you can't double spend.
That's exactly right? So like that's use case number one where I don't necessarily care. There's a second kind of bucket, which is actually, I don't have one identity. I have identities, right? I have my gaming identity, I have my social identity, and I have my worker identity, and they're sometimes separate. So in that sense, I think, okay, we might have like 3 or 4 embedded wallets or 3 or 4 wallets where we share identities. But then to your point, okay, but how do you make it not 50, right? Like that's the problem. And then there's a first shameless plug. I'm actually doing a talk on this on Friday, so please come listen. But it's
when?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Sometime on Friday. Just show up.
Just show up on Friday.
Just show up on Friday, and it'll be there.
I'll be there.
Yeah, just wait. Yeah. And then, but what we're seeing is there's several approaches for how you can do this, right? You can do this. One approach, for instance, is the Farcaster approach, which is you have a hub, which is your identity hub, and then you link a bunch of these wallets to your identity hub, right? So that is an approach that we're seeing folks think about, and obviously it looks like Farcaster, whether explicitly or implicitly, is thinking about it by adding connect your Solana wallet and connect your EVM wallet and verify multiple addresses. That is an approach. A second approach is start with global, meaning you log in on website A or log in on website B, and you get the same embedded wallet or the same thing, regardless of whether you want to or not. And so there are like these really interesting kind of different paths we can go down as an industry for how to resolve this. I wish I had an answer. I don't necessarily do. I am very bullish on the Farcaster approach to things, which is it is easier to build your identity around the place you already spend your time versus try to convince you to spend your time in a new place. And so by Farcaster, for instance, having the inertia of being the town square and the place where you spend your time, you might have 3 Farcaster accounts, to your point, like Twitter, but they might be your hub for 3 identities where you can connect multiple things, whether they're branded wallets or embedded wallets.
Yeah, no, that's great.
I do feel like back to Web 2, because the single sign-on is really good, and identifiers like Google or even the Twitter is just so convenient. And like the Twitter or Facebook, they have the single sign-on, but this based on your social is naturally have your social graph, identity graph. But for Google, it's kind of like the work suite. Like so everyone has Gmail, so that's why you can just naturally use Gmail to create as many things as you want. But like maybe back to Web 1 or Web 0, there's so many different identities. I think single sign-on solved kind of like the solution. Just give the one identifier like for just the logging everything.
But by the way, just on that point, like even within Web 2, you pretty much have like 5 identifiers, right? Because we all have our Gmail, but we also all have Facebook.
Yeah.
And we sometimes log in with Facebook. And we all have Apple if you're an iOS user. And so you log in with Apple. And so even there, and we might have Steam, and you might log into games with Steam. So even there, you actually don't have one single sign-on provider. You have like 5.
Yeah, that's possible. So, so per my understanding, maybe the future is going to be like the AI agents also going to just get into your data. Like, I'm just thinking about how we can just protect our data. Like, there's so many privacy-sensitive data, like to your credit card info, how we can just let your AI agent to access your data, and some, like, given maybe the session key, then revoke the session key, like, temporarily to access your data. Maybe I'm thinking something like this.
So, I mean, for one, I absolutely agree with Itai in that, like, identity is fragmented, and it was fragmented and is fragmented in Web 2. If that's the case already, I see no reason why, like, there's no evidence on why consolidation will occur in Web 3 as well, in particular. And I think identity is a little bit like a catch-22, especially in kind of like crypto and most, even in like Web 2, like KYC providers wanting to do like an aggregated identity. It's a catch-22 because often people will talk about identity, and the OAuth initially was actually open authentication for the sake of like self-sovereign digital identity, but it became SSO only because this is the same thing. People which kind of came up with OAuth was like, okay, we want self-sovereign ownership, but at the end of the day, the largest use case for OAuth was just SSO, and to use your Google account to log in, to maintain one account in particular, because that's where people, at the end of the day, like, identity doesn't matter until you get the distribution. It's not the other way around, right? Farcaster, and the reason why we find it exciting is, yes, they have a nice distributed like session key setup in particular, and they have nice read-write properties in the identity system. But the only reason why we're talking about it, Lens also has something that's pretty cool. But the reason why we talk more about Farcaster and not Lens is because, like, Farcaster has more users at this point in time actually using it. It's like yeah. So I mean, I just think it's more of like, what's MetaMask going to integrate, right? What are the wallet providers going to do? What are the people with TAMs at this point going to be doing?
I can see recently there's more social, like a Web3 social apps. They're just implementing the wallet directly into your social accounts. Maybe you can just use MPC wallet, then just like log into another, new platform. Maybe this can be the new identifiers to just unify everything.
But MPC wallets in itself are app scoped, right?
Yeah.
So how do you get that across?
Yeah. So I think there's a problem, like, under my, like, per my understanding, because like the Magic Link, the Web3 auth, like, you guys are all doing the MPC wallet, but when I'm using like the
Magic's not MPC.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, but anyway, there's so many MPC servers. There are so many like MPC wallets, like competitors now, and when you're using the same Google accounts or same emails to just create like so many different wallets, I think it's kind of like for the users, kind of like bugging themselves. Like, what's the kind of difference? Because I'm using the same Google accounts, but it's just creating the different wallets. How we can just manage it? I think Dynamics trying to solve this problem.
Yeah,
right?
Look, we're thinking through it, but it's a non-trivial problem. It's not necessarily a non-trivial engineering problem. I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, you know this stuff better. I'm assuming you can globally scope an MPC with an iframe and kind of a single origin or thing of approaches there. But it's more, like, I keep thinking about the analogy of if I log into my Amazon account, right, with my Google, and I buy something, and then I log into my Target account and log in with the same Google, and I see my Amazon purchases. That is super weird as an experience. That is like it's not a technical problem as much as a UX and like education problem. So in you know, when you log into Google, there's a very clear expectation setting that Google does with what is shared and what isn't shared. And as much as I've obviously like hubris that Dynamic is going to be an extremely successful company, and so is everyone else here. Google has like a billion billion Gmail users, or 2 billion at this point. And so, what's that? Yeah, more. And so they're the identity provider. Let's not kid ourselves, right? Like them and Facebook and Instagram are the identity providers, and they're going to remain the identity providers for a very long time. And so it's around solving the experience, I think, globally while using them, versus trying to like come up with a new identity provider method, which is far, to your point, like I'm a huge fan of Farcaster. Please follow me, by the way. Just Itai at Farcaster. But they have like 200,000 users, 500,000 users. Like this is, you know, it's still not 2, 3, 4 billion. And so that we should, like all these like, you know, global wallets or identity or things of that sort, we should just take with a grain of salt of like, still a small industry type thing.
And yeah, I think I definitely agree with Itai there, because eventually, if you go back, Google and Facebook became identity providers because they had distribution, because people were there, right? And if Farcaster and some other utility apps become the place where most people spend their time, then that becomes their kind of place to build identity from. But the cool part here, it's not controlled by one company, right? You can take your social graph away and use it in any other way. And I think, although a counterpoint is to your comparison of Amazon account and Target accounts and my purchases, I think the beauty of Web3 is composability. You could take your reputation or your activity from one place to another, which is not a new thing. For example, airline mile programs also use your reputation with Marriott's of the world or 10 other places, and they compose your reputation to give you some loyalty programs, right? So how do airdrops happen? Airdrops happen by developers saying, hey, you're reputable here, you're reputable there because you did A here, B there, C there, and I know that because it's on chain. So let me actually bootstrap your reputation in my ecosystem or community by using your existing identity and reputation, right? So the conversation becomes less about global identifiers, but more about localized kind of reputation graphs in a way, right? Of course, which is scary, it's open, which is a different conversation altogether. But it's also, maybe it's a feature and not a bug, because first time we have an open data layer, which kind of makes us combine and bring this composability.
I'm not sure if you guys have heard of Matterstone? Matterstone. No?
No.
Spelled that backwards? No, I'm kidding.
It was basically it's I think it came up about 8 years ago in particular. They vehemently hate crypto, the team, but they are basically Farcaster without like the blockchain component of the commitments being put on chain. So it's open social graph. They have like their Twitter clones in particular. They got quite a bit of traction in like the SF community, like 4 or 5 years ago. But then now it's mainly used for like, you know, unfortunately, like, you know, dubious, nefarious activities. You know, like, but so I look at that, and then I look at Farcaster, and I just feel like the open social graph isn't a driving factor. If it was, Matterstone would have been popular. Or maybe it's just timing as well and crowd.
Right.
But, you know, it's like...
I think it's just...
It's like...
I think it's just to make it easier to access. But you're right, this is another factor to run everything.
Right.
Look, I mean, most users just, they don't care that much about decentralization, right? The driving factor has to be a better product and more innovation. But I completely agree with you, Sahil, that we can build a better identity systems, right? Ultimately, Google and Facebook, they have the distribution, but they're terrible identity providers, especially Google. Like, oh, great, you signed on with your Gmail. Like, that doesn't tell me anything about you, and how easy is it to create a fake Gmail, right? So what's great is that we can vampire attack them by using these single sign-ons as starting points, and then we can build something much better that does have reputation systems, and that does create, like you say, composability and competition. We want competition and interoperability at all these different layers, whether we're talking about identity, whether we're talking about social media applications and so on. They should all be interoperable, and we should not have one, winner take all, one or winner take most kind of outcomes like we did in Web 2. So I don't think just saying Google or Facebook have got this covered is an acceptable solution at all. But it's a great starting point we can build off of.
I think, to your point, I think maybe to clarify, I don't think Google or Facebook have it covered. Versus I think Farcaster is a good example, for instance, of the value proposition it provides is a vertical town square for crypto. Right, that is the use case. Right. The killer use case is essentially vertical town square for crypto. And so in the same way, to your point, what I do think will happen is we'll move from the top 5 identity providers, like the Facebook, Google, Instagram, which is Facebook, and Twitter, Apple, and Twitter, to maybe 50 identity providers. And that might be powered by wallets, for instance, right? It might be that Robinhood is your financial identity provider, right? And Farcaster is your crypto identity provider, and you might have your Steam is your gaming identity provider. And so I do think there's going to be this evolution of additional identity providers that I hope actually use crypto rails. To your point on composability, I don't think we'll go to like 5,000. Right. But I think we'll definitely see a login with Robinhood over time that is your hub, to your point, shares more than your email.
Absolutely, it could share your KYC, right? Because there's so many different layers to identity. So you're absolutely right. It's like, is it verifying that you're human? Is it verifying that you've been KYC'd? Is it verifying your physical location, that you live in a certain country or whatever? And all of these can then, they can be aggregated by certain platforms. But again, those can be competing with one another. Those don't need to be just one winner take all.
So I think it's actually cool that you brought that up. Coinbase might give Robinhood a run for their money because Coinbase recently launched attestations that Coinbase.com issues to any wallet on Base that your KYC was already performed. Yeah. And you're able to trade crypto in these countries. That's beautiful. That's Robinhood for you. But Coinbase, with the right kind of privacy protection, right? Hey, that's a centralized company. They have the data, sure. They have to run a service in a regulated way. But they can extend that to your EOA, right? And that's kind of the beauty of it too. Like we'll see even things like attestations become really good tools to enable such things as well.
100%, right? To your point, 100%. Like we'll see. I really hope, right? 2 years ago, I think Circle and Coinbase did the Verity program, and I think this is the iteration of that, or like a future version of that. I struggle with KYC specifically as the attestation versus other attestations, mostly because there's an inherent incentive for a company to do its own KYC, so it can show that it did its own KYC. Right. And so there's like this weird compliance incentive there. But I'm with you. I completely agree. I think like EAS, for instance, is like a phenomenal platform that I hope we all leverage for this stuff. Or put stuff on Dynamic.xyz or do that type. Those types of short answer is absolutely. I think the observation you made is the critical one, which is today with Gmail, you pretty much share your email address. It should be a much deeper type of like identity handshake for what is transferred in a privacy-preserving manner.
Yeah, and Itai, you touched on a really good point, which is the incentive systems here around KYC specifically. But I think more broadly, I would put this question out to all of you guys, which is monetization of the identity layer. It's going to be a hard one to monetize, and
yeah, it's really hard.
I want to actually hear all your guys' thoughts on this.
Because I think like for some reason, so we are doing the identity for free, like some onboarding SDK for free, and like we are partnering with Karma 3, so we just want to like maybe monetize through the data, and that's kind of like the business maybe they wanted. And I think, yeah, it's pretty hard to just only providing the onboarding SDK to just convince the enterprise or the dApps just to adopt it and just like giving like the original way, like in the Web2, like Auth0 or Okta, they're just charging for usage or something. So yeah, I think maybe you guys know more because you guys talk to enterprise more.
So I mean, I think the biggest problem of monetizing authentication is that, like, you know, the efficiencies through, as a user, I only want to authenticate once. And my ideal is I authenticate once into any app. I do KYC once into any app, and I'm done. That's my internet connection for life, right? I never do this again. That's the ideal, because that's the ideal user experience. It's the ideal, like, also, like, you could argue, like, data and privacy controls, because only one of my data exists out there. That's the ideal that we all strive for, right?
Can we apply the same ideal to ETHDenver side events? I just put in my bio once to sign up for.
That's right.
For real, man. That's
maybe
insane.
just use this one. This is
maybe
NFC.
We start that use case, right? But that's the ideal, and then I think, and that's the ideal that we strive for. That's why we like the open protocols. That's the value that we ultimately try to bring through these open protocols. But then when you take a look at, when you compare like Web3 monetization of like identity, and when we take a look at Web2, if we take a very naive lens to Web2 and just go, okay, look, KYC, people are charging $1 to $2 per pop, right? You know, like, wouldn't you as an application want to pay maybe just 50 cents and not do the KYC? Wouldn't you want to do that? But then when you take a deeper look into the industry, you actually realize that these KYC providers themselves are already actually doing this. If there are two companies using the same KYC provider, they only make the user do it once. They have these, not all of them, but a lot of them do have these fundamental inherent efficiencies, albeit, yes, in a centralized manner, but they already do have these efficiencies, and that's the market price of what is, like, of identities, like, being charged at already. Right, considering that.
In that context, how do you prevent reselling? So I pay 50 cents to you, you attest the KYC to me, and then now I have that at the station, and I go resell it to 50 other guys for 1 penny a piece.
I mean, the way they do it is like data liability, like, you know, just basic SaaS contracts and all, in a very centralized
that you're not allowed to resell.
But in Web3, yeah, naturally, like, how would you do that, right? Like, because ownership of the credential, there's designated verifier signatures. I'm not sure if Vitalik had a post on that, which basically, I can tell you believe it, but you can't share it but it doesn't really work. But I think, yeah, I mean, they're practical. We can leave it as an open question. They're practical, technical problems, like you say. But I think the point that I was just trying to get at is that Web2 itself is also attempting this. So, like, us attempting this is also not unique. And it's quite... I've been trying, I don't have an answer here, but I've just when I dive into this problem, I just realized that it's so much harder to bring out a 10x product that improves on top of Web2 today, because people are already actively trying to do this, albeit in less open manners.
And to your point, by the way, on that front, I don't know if any Web2, I don't know if the personas or the cognitos of the world, you know, or Authentics or whatever, when they go and sell, to your point, whether they do this or not, I don't think it's a sales proposition. I don't think anyone actually cares, right? What folks care about...
They don't even talk about it.
They don't talk about it, right? They talk about, hey, I can do this faster than my competitor. I might save you a couple cents, right? I can do it with AI. I can do whatever. I can detect more type of fraud. But at the very basic level... And I think we saw this. I think there are a lot of companies 2 years ago that try to do on-chain KYC, and it's worth bringing them and talking. I don't know enough, but I haven't seen, from my lens...
there's Fractal ID, there's
Barada.
Yeah, Civic.
Civic. That might be doing really well. It's not... I don't know if that's the value proposition they go to market with versus the value proposition of here's the thing I'm actually solving for you, which is making sure no one fraudulent goes through. So that's this interesting thing. We can solve this in Web3. Does it help anyone we solve this in Web3? I don't know.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think we are still waiting for the critical amount of users on any developer consumer app to learn, like, hey, these are the pain points. I can't run this infra without KYC identity or reputation compute. And only that would be the litmus test to understand what is the monetization model. I think a little bit premature still because we don't have scale yet.
Do you guys think Mika is going to be that trigger?
What's going to be that trigger?
The markets and crypto assets bill. Oh, so like in last year, there was this bill that the EU passed, markets and crypto assets, MiCA, and basically it comes into effect in January 2025, and basically almost all crypto applications that have a blockchain attached, deal with transactions, will require KYC AML to be published and distributed in Europe, in particular, in Jan 2025. I thought, yeah, so like...
I heard about Mika. I did not hear about that requirement, and that's coming up fast.
Yeah, yeah. And all of the KYC providers are talking about it, like, the ZK, Me, ZK Pass, and all of those guys.
Yeah, ZK Pass, yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, I would, if it has the same effect as GDPR did on data protection, right. I think that might be a trigger that might be the use case that you're looking for that forces consumer applications to suddenly go like, okay, something, needs to, like, it just drives adoption for that, right? That identity use case.
I think one place where we think a lot about value creation and potentially value capture for a protocol is what are the things that are going to just cost too much for a developer to do, but are important for them to provide a useful experience, right? Which is a very simple thing that anyone would think about in any startup, not just crypto. And in our scenario, it is, hey, Google, Facebook, Apple, so many consumer apps have a bunch of GPUs, they have a bunch of money, they control the algorithms, they control the computing power, and they control the data. But in Web3, the data is open, and there are third-party developers like all of us which are trying to create meaningful user experiences, but everyone having to go and index data on the blockchain, running compute to make sense of their data, that's costly. And that's a high-friction thing. So what if we could run a compute protocol which could solve ranking and reputation, and people would just use be able to, in almost like a no-code way, power amazing experiences using this infra. So that's how I would think about monetization.
I'm interested to hear your view on, have you guys explored doing this like computation thing for capture?
That's
like
a great,
DDoS, for
that's a
DDoS
great
prevention
example.
and connection?
We haven't tried yet, but that's a great line of thought.
So recapture, like cross-sourcing, like everyone just competing. Yeah, that's maybe possible because I saw like many new projects. They are just claiming they're like a decentralized AI or the decentralized Hugging Face. So they're just providing the data or just providing the like a clean data or sorted data that's just for the different like platforms. They can just use the data to train their own model or something. So I think that would be interesting because. Each of the users, they have their own identity, like how they just provide the data to the trainer or to the model trainer. Yeah. So so I'm still thinking about like how if we can just run a computational layer or maybe the Oracle, they can just directly in and so let the data in and out like through the AI agent. So maybe the AI agent can just autonomously run on chain to just run some algorithm or to just interact with a smart contract. And yeah, basically I think I personally believe that the future is gonna be like the AI agent is gonna just do many things for us and automatically. Yeah.
Has anybody else dived into capture apart from the AI use case?
AI use case in what way? Like
no,
beating capture?
I'm primarily talking about capture. Like, have you guys like, there was capture that was first launched by Google. I'm just basically talking about like DDoS prevention at this point.
Yeah.
Like,
sorry, what prevention?
Sorry?
What prevention?
DDoS.
DDoS, yeah.
DDoS prevention in particular.
So technically, you could use something like the eigentrust algorithm, which we're basing our compute on. Where it was initially used is similar to your CAPTCHA context. It was used for decentralized file sharing networks back in 2005, where if you download files from a Sybil-prone node network on the internet, you have to just quickly report back if you download a scam file or an empty file, etc. And there'll be an automated feedback loop which will rank every single peer in the network or every single node in the network. And you could find malicious actors, you can find bot farms, etc. So that could be applied in a way. But of course, I think it will be important to understand what would be the reputation heuristics or what would be this transitive
I'm actually
trust
trying
and
to
distrust.
figure that from you.
Yes.
Because
yes. So I think if there are, so depending on what use case do you find CAPTCHA getting DDoSed, and if that data.
So I mean, if we take a look at like Web 2 today, that data is primarily through like edge node connections, right? Like Amazon has their edge nodes, Cloudflare has their edge nodes in particular. And websites like sign up to use these. If you're using Amazon, you set up your WAF and all that. And then they basically collect all of these IP addresses which are connecting to all of their bare metal instances. And then they, from that, run heuristics on it and then detect these.
So it's a little bit of a machine learning trained model that they use with all the parameters that they have amassed, perhaps.
Yeah, and I mean, it's all private, right? They just apply their own, and it's not just private. It's like literally dynamic because they change it as, you know, it's a cat and mouse game,
right?
In particular, yeah. I mean, I was just interested to hear your thoughts, whether you guys have explored that particular problem down to that.
Not yet. I think so far we've gone deep in anything where there's on-chain data or open data, even if it's on Ceramic, for example, and it's peer-to-peer, then we could really form a reputation graph. We could compute on that graph and then create a ranking system of every single peer in the network. So where this is useful is, let's say I could rank all smart contracts on any chain. I could rank any NFTs on any chain based on transitive transaction activity. So because all of that data is open, and you could form certain assumptions of what is scam and not, and just run the algo. But with CAPTCHA, we'll have to look deeper into what data is available, right? So that's kind of why we haven't gone there yet. But we've restricted ourselves to, hey, how do we solve for on-chain reputation, since that data is kind of open for us.
What would you say is your largest use case right now today? Where you're seeing the most traction? Yeah.
I think there are many layers. So one layer is really like, I was at the MetaMask security event today, and really the big picture is how do you solve for software security in a completely malicious environment? Like, you know, snaps are coming out. So MetaMask is going from a wallet to a platform where it's almost like an execution environment. People can ship code, which is snaps. Now, if you let anyone publish snaps, pretty much like frames, but frames right now don't touch your wallet keys, right? It's not an ECDSA key. But with snaps, it's your wallet. How do you prevent any malicious actor to publish a snap and drain your funds? So for that, you need some kind of a reputation graph, reputation system, where you can endorse a snap from security research, reputable people, and people can report if there's a malicious activity happening. And that feedback loop is fast, it's trustworthy, and it's resilient. Like right now, how do we figure out security attacks? We go on Twitter, all the crypto Twitter people we follow, if someone says, hey, this smart contract was attacked, right? And this is billions of dollars worth of money lost. So I'm just talking about that use case, where you need some sort of a peer-to-peer reputation system to bring security measures into crypto. And it's needed because it's kind of an open data.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just to clarify, just to make sure I understand. So they would do it essentially in a decentralized way where everyone can report that an app is a fraudulent, so like a decentralized flagging of an app.
Right.
And then if enough people do it over a short period of time.
So great question. So everyone can go and report if there's a fraudulent app. But everyone's voice is not the same. Because I might be a better security researcher, but you might be even better than me. And if I want to just attack, like DDoS a snap, which might be safe, I might spin up 100,000 wallets and say, go and report that snap. But guess what? The reputation of each of those wallets is near zero, because not enough trustworthy people trust or vouch for that user. So this whole reporting system is community-based, but it cannot work without user reputation, because otherwise it's DDoSed or Sybil prone, right? So, and to build that, you need peer-to-peer user attestations, vouchers, using EAS or any other on-chain or off-chain attestation. Once you get that system rolling, then you have a user reputation which can be used for reporting snaps, for airdrops, for any of those things. So that's kind of the fundamental layer that we're trying to, in the stack, build. And also the caveat is reputation is context specific. So I will trust a security auditor's opinion about a fake snap or a frame more than just anyone who's active on social, right? So that's kind of the thinking.
Yeah. I think that's security is such a great use case. And then you mentioned airdrops. One other one I was going to bring up is governance, really online voting, right? And especially as we're building out these community graphs, being able to vote in communities and for other people's levels of community membership, it's really important that somebody can't create a bunch of fake accounts or duplicate accounts to increase the amount of voice they have by casting more votes. But really anything that has to do with online voting is prone to Sybil attacks. So.
Yeah, and Optimism alone as a chain is going to spend $100 million in RPGF this year. And the number one problem is they have to give away money in a distributed, decentralized fashion. Who gets money and who gets to decide? Both these questions need that fundamental identity and reputation answer too. How we use on-chain data, how we use impact metrics, how we use peer-to-peer vouching, all of these are answers to it. But even solving like just one chain having to spend $100 million, that's exactly one of the use cases.
Exactly. Yep.
Right. I think we have 8 minutes left. So since I'm not sure, do we still have the Q&A session or? Sorry, do we have still have the Q&A session, or we just yeah, go. Okay, good. Yeah. Yeah, I think thank you all for attending our like a mini summit, and yeah, you guys just provided so many new perspective and ideas to the identity side. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you guys.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you so much, Homin.
Oh, there's some. Okay, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. Quick question. So, how do we define like different identities? Like, for example, I have my identity at my LinkedIn. I have my identity amongst my college friends. I have identity amongst my colleagues. These are all different kind of group of community, but I have a different key, private key for Lens protocol, and I have different key for DeFi. And how do we make sure that we cover like identity as a person rather than just fragmented category?
I can try to take a first stab at this. You're not going to like the answer, but we can't. I don't think we can. I think it's like forever going to be chaos, because I'll just, again, let's look at Web 2. The way I use Gmail and Apple login is going to be different than the way you use it. Technically the same systems, we're going to use it very differently. And the way I used it a year ago is probably very different than the way I use it today. So even within just me, the way I define my identity changes over time, right? And so, and the way I have my Twitter identity is different. And so, honestly, I don't think we can. I think it's like identity is a set. First, it's identities, right? And I think inherently it's chaotic because a person is like evolves over time, and not to get too philosophical, a network of people evolves over time. And so I don't know if you can. I think you can give tools. I think there are going to be more prominent identities. My answer is you really can't define what is an identity. Yeah.
I think that's right, but I would draw a clear distinction between defining it and aggregating it, so it's not fragmented, right? So it's like, how do you define yourself as a person? That sounds like a great essay in a philosophy 101 class, and one you'll never get to the bottom of. But how do you aggregate yourself as a person? Well, here I am, right? So I think we can have a lot of different identities, and they can still all be aggregated by certain platforms as those aggregator providers, and then they can attest for you that you have a certain number of followers on Twitter, or that you've been KYC'd by this and this, or that you have a certain reputation in a certain community, giving you that you're good at so and so, that you're an expert on security, or whatever it might be. And all these things can be aggregated, and you can choose what gets attested in what context as it's needed, without having to define all of these things. That's actually a lot more philosophical and not really necessary.
Yeah, I think my take on this is that, and this is a never-ending, again, not to sound philosophical like all of us, but this is a never-ending spectrum between, so there's two things. One is a distinction between identity and reputation. I think identity is a little bit more about, hey, this is who you are, and I prove it, and it defines you, and it's defined by you in some way. Reputation is a little bit about how other people are interacting with you, what you're doing in that context, and how you build that reputation, right? So you might have a great reputation amongst your colleagues in your work environment. You might have a great reputation as a DeFi farmer in that environment, or as a layer 2 governance community voting person. Now, they can exist separately, and it's really context specific, which one gets used, if you want to combine, and I think that's the philosophical kind of way to think about it, is unless it's required, it doesn't matter, but the context of which one, like, hey, if you want to go for a job, you say, hey, talk to my colleagues, I have good reputation. If you want to go for a designing protocol economics for a DeFi protocol, and you're a DeFi farmer who's accrued a lot of reputation, you'd say, hey, check out my reputation. So I think it will be context specific that way to a lot of these points. But I also see identity and reputation a little bit different. Identity is a little bit more static, reputation is a little bit more dynamic, no pun intended. So yeah, so that's another kind of way to think about it.
I think it's just based on incentive. Like, do the user's incentive or the platform's incentive? Like for platforms, maybe they can just combine all of your identities, your personas together, because they can just do the marketing or the personalized ads. But for users, maybe you want to get airdrop from the community. Maybe they recently Starknet, they just test, are you a good so not only you can just so when you want to just get a Starknet airdrop, so you can try to use your GitHub, and you can try to use your Ethereum interaction. They can just test, are you a good hacker? Are you interact more with Ethereum? Are you Ethereum builder? Or are you just one of the contributor to the Starknet? So there are so many different things, so many different identities, but based on your incentive, how when you have the incentive, you definitely want to combine together, but you don't have it, you want to just keep your privacy or keep it there, so there's no incentive, so keep it simple.
I think there's one more question.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. More of a follow-up question of the previous one. I absolutely agree with the fact that as far as identity is concerned, it's very much about application context. For example, you got a GitHub handle, you got a LinkedIn handle. So the question is, in crypto, right? What is the best application context where we can just have a useful identity? Is it ENS? Is it for DeFi? And the other side of the question is, say I'm going to build an awesome aggregator, right? What should we use as the ID for the aggregator? Is it a URL address, or maybe extend that a little bit? Is it maybe address for a smart contract wallet, or could it be ENS? So that's the two questions I want to ask: the application context, or and the actual ID we can use to aggregate user data, or it could be DID, wallet address, ENS. I'm not sure. So yeah, that's the question.
My lens is that it's going to be your identity in Web3, or like the way you establish your identity in Web3 is going to be based, is going to arise from the apps you use most often on Web3. So I would say, let's look at the apps that have the most daily active users and the most time a person spends throughout the day in those apps. That's your identity. It's not ENS, right? You can buy an ENS name. It's going to be, you know, in Web3, it's either, again, going to be Lens or Farcaster. It might be the NFT marketplaces like Magic Eden or an OpenSea where you spend a lot of your time, or it might be, you know, one more version of that. But it's the same way, like, why is Google your identity? Because it's tied to your Gmail and you're in your email all day. And why is Instagram your identity? Because, or TikTok can be your identity because you open and you start your day with that, right? And so I would say your Web3 identity will likely tie into that. I would argue it's much more likely that a Farcaster or a Magic Eden become your identity versus a Uniswap, where you might trade once a day or once every week, versus might interact 10 times a day on a Magic Eden, might interact 100 times a day on the Lens, right? So that would be my argument for like where your identity would be rooted, and then everything is just services on top of it. So an ENS is just a service on top of it. But my identity is not my ENS. My ENS is just a very easy way for me to reflect my name on a Magic Eden or you know, a Farcaster. That's a little bit how I think about it.
All right, time's up. So thank you for attending. Yeah, thanks for everyone for listening.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.